Hi guys, and welcome back to one of my videos. And the model I would like to review today is something quite rare, because it's not so easy to find this model around any longer. It has been produced by Protar Model Kit. Protar Modelli Provini was something coming from the 80s, I guess the end of the 80s, and it is a quite interesting model, very rare and very famous between the enthusiast lovers of real Formula 1 car. It was the Ferrari 126 C2 Turbo. It was the car driven by Gilles Villeneuve and Didier Pironi in the 1982 season, and it's very interesting in my opinion because this is the only model, quite unique at today, of this car in 1/24 scale. We all know that other companies like Fujimi and the Studio 27 made this car in the bigger scale, in 120, and also Model Factory Hero made in 112. I got that kit, maybe I can make a review of that, but it's quite much more famous than what I can say. I mean, I never seen before a proper comment about this model, probably because it's too old, probably also too rare, and mostly I think the problem is around the scale itself, because these models still belong to the era where they were not still so sure about what scale develop for static model kits. So we had Tamiya, that was the one making the brand and making the series, working in 120 scale, and it is what nowadays all the other companies are working around. So also the brand new Fujimi, also the Transkit and Model Factory, it's everything in 120, usually the common scale for Formula 1 cars. And instead 124 remains the scale for GT or ordinary street cars and trucks and all the other kind of models, this is anyway quite important because I think I love this car. I think I have all the models existing of this car. I have the 143 scale, both Tamiya kit and BBR and everything that have been made, 24, 18, 12. Also I got the 1/8 scale with the model made by Procom some years ago. That is terrible because it's too many parts are missing, so I don't know what to do with that kit, but I save just because I'm a real lover of Gilles Villeneuve and that pilot of the 80s. For me this was probably also for my history with my relatives, we love it so much to see the Formula 1 races in television when Formula 1 was exciting, when all guy here, it is everything is reminding from the 80s and the 90s, mostly modern Formula 1. I don't follow so much, I think, and I don't know the names of the pilots involved in modern Formula 1, but this Formula 1 was really interesting because it was belonging to an era of still quite romantic, let me say, era of this stuff, because I was a kid and there was so much interest around these pilots, So Gilles Villeneuve car, this was probably the most infamous car because the 27 car in this position was exactly the car that he had when he died in Zolder in 1982. I think it was the 8th of May 1982, and Gilles Villeneuve is still one of the biggest champions, loved by fans, by tifosi in Italy, and everybody really like that little Canadian guy. He had a son that he has a son that was a world champion. He won Indianapolis, win everything. Jacques Villeneuve is a true champion. But the myth created by Gilles Villeneuve and by his way of life was something really belonging to another era. And for me, it remains really the pilot of Formula 1. So for me, Formula 1 is Gilles Villeneuve, just him. And the model itself is very rare, I think, just because of this problem of the scale of this car. And inside the box, what you will find, this is extra stuff, this is extra stuff, this is extra stuff, everything is extra stuff, that I place it inside because I want to build this model. I don't want to collect it and keep it like it is. I want to build it up and make something decent in this scale, You see at once that the scale is quite strange, you know, it's not used. If you see the Fujimi model, you get it at once that the proportion is much bigger, you know. When the numbers in scale became smaller, the difference in scale from 120 to 124 are huge difference. It's much more if you see from 172 to 180, the difference is quite smaller, you know. Instead in bigger scale the difference is huge, and the model was quite simple. Remember that this is, I think, a kit produced, I guess, something like let me see, there is something written in the instructions. I don't find it, but I think if the car is related to 1982, it should be around 1983 and 1984, something like that, you know. So it was the latest production of Protar. They were not so bad model, you know. They just had compared to modern stuff, they just had a lack of details and lack of the small bits that we like so much in models, so photo etched set and fine plastic, you know. But it is still a very decent model. So inside the box you will find this little book that is the instruction, you know, is pretty well done, you know, quite clear. There is a brief history of the car and the obvious tip that they give always in this model. So don't eat it, don't throw your baby and this model from the window, something like that. Don't cook it, don't burn it, well, something like that. Quite clear, quite simple, you know, because the model is relatively simple, you know, but I think is a great basics for a nice model, because anyway you have the composition of the model is pretty well done. It of course is similar to the real car, so we have the upper hatch that is neither so much deformed. This is not the first kit I have of this Frrari. I think I had nearly 5 or 6 before this one that I decided to build, and it's neither wrinkled, you know. One of the problems of Protar models was except the lack of the detail, usually it was that sometimes the plastic became wrinkled, you know, and this was quite a problem, you know, because it was absolutely ugly to open a box and find your part already turned, and you had to place that in warm water. You had to do something magical to keep them straight, you know. So this one is pretty well molded, I guess. Yes, you see, we have the separated vents to have a better detail. Of course, in this position probably the molded machine of the time was not able to make decent details. The nose, this is a critical part in all the 126E2 models, because all the noses, if you look at Fujimi, is a little bit thick, is a little different in the shape, and there's nothing impossible. There have been several conversions kit and racing part, but I think studying very carefully the images of this car, probably also before the Zolder race, you know, because this was very famous in the beginning of the season, because it was absolutely a very winning Ferrari. So it was probably something that should take the World Championship to Maranello in 1982 if they didn't have the disgrace of nearly losing the two pilots. No, Gilles Villeneuve died in Zolder accident, and a little later on, I think in Hockenheim, Didier Pironi had a terrible crash where he get seriously injured in the legs, and the career was nearly done there. So the car became a kind of ghost for Ferrari, because consider that today there is no real original existing 126C2 Ferrari turbo existing today. The only one that you see around is a converted car, little different also in the specs. You see that there is something not convincing in the line of the car, because basically it's not a replica, I guess, but it's something. I read the history sometimes ago, derivated from a following model and then backdated, you know. But about the 126C2, there is absolutely nothing existing any longer. They say that all the chassis existing of this car or have been destroyed, or have been scrapped, or transformed in the following C3. That was a quite different car. The body was different, the radiator was in a different position, so it was basically another car, and that's why you basically will never see this car in any museum and so on. It's very helpful that today we have platforms like Facebook or Google groups, where they have really millions of pictures of this car, and in the last few years I've seen that a lot of guys are posting pictures also quite unknown, at least for me, about this car, and they are absolutely very critical in the production of the model. And the other parts, I placed this back because in my box these were running around, so they were not so well saved, and I tried to strip it down the the chrome that is always fake in this kind of model, but I was not able to do so. I had to try something different. You know, I tried with ammoniac, but it didn't work. And it was a silver plated, chrome plated, honestly, not silver plated, and of course not so badly done. The chrome is always a little I don't know how to say, but it's not nice. You see that is a fake effect. Was so common in model kits of the 80s, you know. Also the brightness and the shiny was not so really well done. And we have also the part that goes inside the engine that should be made absolutely different. You know, you have to add some details to this model. They also provide a version, because in the front cover of the model the car still had the two wings, so it was something with the configuration with the wing, because this car in different picture is with or without a front spoiler, you know. And also this was the one that tested the different rear spoiler with two smaller spoiler, one beside the other. I don't think it worked so well in the race. I think it was Detroit, something like that, you know. Real Formula 1 passionate can correct me absolutely about this. Anyway, also this part is not so badly done. Of course, it's a little thick. You have to consider that the model is middle 80s, and then this part, that is the one that probably allow you to do something good with this model, that is the basic of the chassis. You see, the main aluminium frame. This was a part made in aluminium, quite famous, you know, the cockpit. It was quite famous, and there is several pictures about this. Also, in the latest part of the 1982 season, it was the first car where they start to add carbon fiber parts inside the structure of the car to try to reinforce it after a Villeneuve tragedy. And for example, the Procom kit, the one in 1.8, the huge model in 1.8, had all the upper part of the body made completely in carbon fiber, and I was little suspicious about that, because studying the crashes, and I didn't know so much about the car at the time, but I asked directly because I had the way to keep in touch with Mauro Furghieri when he was working in Modena for the Hill Climb Racing, you know, and I directly asked him if this car was ever made in some parts in carbon fiber, and he was absolutely direct and say absolutely not. The car was not in carbon fiber, it was just fiberglass, and small details were testing in 1982 with carbon fiber, but absolutely not the body and not the main part of the external part of the car were not made in carbon fiber. So it was just absolutely ordinary fiberglass, or Kevlar, of course, that is anyway kind of fiberglass, a little more resistant, but you know, it's absolutely not the specific parts of carbon fiber. And the Procom kit is completely made in carbon fiber to make it probably more expensive. Or the owner of the company at the time told me that the real purpose to make that part in the 1.8 kit, it was just because it seems, and I don't know how much it's trustable or not, it seems that during the travel around the world, because he sold some of this kit around the world, it seems that the part in ordinary plastic can wrinkle much more easy than the parts in carbon fiber. This I absolutely don't know. I know that many guys around the world take the kit and they have the same identical problem that I have, so the parts are missing. There is a lot of very nice, thin detail, but you cannot finish the model because too many parts are absolutely missing. So we will see about that. And the last part is the under chassis. You know, it's quite basic also here, and it's very similar to the Revel model series. It was just Revel going on with the 1/24 scale Formula 1 kits, and they didn't have this big success because of course they were not competing to the bigger guys like Tamiya, like Model Factory Hero. You make the real details. This is cars that when you make completely open, you can see all the mechanicals, all the wiring, and it's very nice to see these models open. So if you don't have that part, if you just work in huge plastic, it's everything over the modeler to increase detail. Also the steering wheel is quite ridiculous. It was very simple, you know, and without any significant detail. So it will be a huge work of super detailing and make it nice, you know, because that nice part will be when completed to have the typical shape of the Ferrari 126 between the other cars. I want to see this one together with my other GT collection and together with my other cars in the proper scale. Then about the tires, the model, I think these were the original tires from the car, you know. The car in the beginning had the 13-inch rims, and only at the end of the season and just before in the middle of the season, sorry, and just before the death of Villeneuve, they featured the 15-inch wheel that look much more wider inside. You get from picture at once, looking the picture of the car of the time, you know, and you will see at once that there is in some picture the wheels look slightly different, you know, than the usual picture that we are used to see about this one. Then I took also, I had a selection of previous wheels of the similar period. These were coming from Rosso Corporation. It was a subsidiary company from Fujimi that ended in a quite funny way because the owner decided to burn the company. It was quite good company, you know, it was a kind of high brand of Fujimi, but Rosso Corporation, I think they disappeared in the end of, or in the beginning of the 90s, you know, and there was this big scam that arrived worldwide about this guy that tried to make the worst fraud ever, so trying to burn the company to take the money from the insurance, and they get him, you know. And I took this bag of wheels just to see if there is something with a better material, because of course also the rubber used by Protar itself in the originals was not so nice like the Tamiya rubber tire. Tamiya rubber tires seems a real tire, you know, they are, you know what I'm talking about. When you open the Tamiya kit and when you open the tire, they look like real tires in that model kit. This, last but not least, is a critical part of the model, because of course probably the worst part ever of the model was the Deca Sheet. So what did I do to save it in the proper way? I took this from Indicals. This is made from my friend Michael, and I wanted to have absolutely his decal here. I wrapped it completely, but I can open for the video purpose and show you. He made a very very nice decal sheet in all the scale. They are available since 133, I guess, to 112 and 120 or 124, freshly printed. That's why they are so Indicals decals, you see. And I deeply suggest you guys these items, because he really make very good quality decals. And here it is. Later on we'll wrap it again to keep it safe. And here is the correct end. You may say, Paolo, you say correct and then you take the older one. Nah. This is the correct decal about the car. So this was what you get in the original Protar kit. You see a little yellowish, and basically if you get closer to the numbers 27 and 28, they are completely in the wrong font. Instead, Indicals made a wonderful work here, making much more precise, much more fresher. It's really well done, and so this is really the trick to make the model look nice like the car that we have. It was nice that Protar at the time didn't choose to take the usual badly assembled model or whatever kind of model, but just the real car from this wonderful Ferrari, you know, from this mythical Ferrari. And you see immediately that all the logos and all the font match much more than the don't let me say the bad word, you know, but than this stuff that we had from Protar. Despite it was probably also well printed, because I think back in time these were all printed by Cartograph or Zanchetti, so the quality of this original Deca Sheet may be good. The problem is that the font and the writings are not, so they are again completely coming from the 80s. This is a critical part in a model like this. So take this sheet if you find the model of this C2. I see that they start to have stellar prices in eBay, and very, I don't know how to define, you know, the people that have the model want big money for this car right now, and I don't think absolutely it's worth it. So I think it's the ordinary price for this model will be around 50 bucks, something like that, 70 bucks, let me say, but not more. I mean, it is not something that you have to pay $300 or $400 like they are listing nowadays in eBay and similar platforms. So this was my review, guys. Hope you enjoy it, and I'm not so used to make review about the kits. I prefer to show you what I do, my racing stuff, my productions, or the finished model with all the assembly process during the musical video, But sometimes, and little by little, I would like to start to make a review of something, in my opinion, little special, at least interesting for you, some kits that is not so common, not so easy to find around, and something that maybe it's worth a little investigation before you decide to invest some big money in a project that you don't know what there is inside. So that's it, guys, and thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.